Good afternoon, everyone, from Dunrobin Ranch in Lolo, Montana. We're welcoming you to a rather warm, less smoky afternoon. We're glad to see that some of the smoke has been rising out of the valley. And here with me today is our wonderful Cherie, who is our resident Osprey gal. She worked with the University of Montana last year as a student intern with Osprey. And today, she and I are going to be talking about banding ospreys. Our own ospreys were banded a couple weeks ago, Friday, July 9th. And I know many of you are probably curious about why do we do this with our ospreys, or why do the scientists do that? Well, it answers a lot of questions for us, and it can be a little bit traumatic for the chicks, but generally they weather it very well. And it gives scientists such important information that can be used to help in the conservation of ospreys that the risk is really worth the effort and the benefit. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Cherie, and I'll just chime in a little bit after she's finished. She's put together this great little PowerPoint for us. So Cherie, take it away.
All right, hello everyone. Let me get my screen set up here and we'll get going talking about banding the ospreys. All right, how's that look?
Looks great.
All right. So first off, you are totally correct, Suzanne. Banding gives us a lot of information, or gives the scientists a lot of information so that we can help conserve and manage populations of many different bird species. But here, obviously, we are focused on ospreys. Over the long term, the info that we collect by banding on populations, lifespan, reproduction, cause of death, migration, it gives us information on all of that. And also, we use these bright blue bands, and so it really helps the identification. Who does it around here? We have two really great organizations, one through the university called Montana Osprey Project, and one conservation research and education program, Raptor View Research, also based out of Missoula. And these scientists are registered with the USGS as banders. And so they come out and do the banding for us and collect and report the data. How it's done is have this lovely photo of a bucket truck going up. So when the chicks are large enough so that their legs are about as big as they're going to get, but before they can fly, they go up in the bucket truck and retrieve them, and then bring them all at once back down and work as quickly as possible, because it's usually pretty hot, and it's about July, it's usually pretty hot. So they have misters and ways to keep the birds cool while they collect blood samples, feather samples, and the weight of the chick, which is important. So they collect blood samples in order to look at, well, for the Montana Osprey Project, the main thing is heavy metal contamination. So osprey are top predators, which means that they are ingesting the highest level of toxins as the biomagnification going up the system, as you can tell in this nice little chart here. So the small fish are eaten by the bigger fish, and the big fish are eaten by the osprey. And those heavy metals, that's an elemental thing, and it doesn't decompose or anything like that. It just goes up. So when we take blood samples, they can see the overall health of the ecosystem, the river ecosystem, because they are those indicators. With the blood samples, they can also sex the chicks, which is good to know. And then the feather sample, I believe, is a backup for, they can also tell the toxin level in there. And a very interesting finding from a Montana Osprey Project has been an unexpected high levels of mercury in the nestlings. It's shown that a lot of the nestlings have 100 times the level of mercury that would be toxic to humans in their system. So a little bit concerning, but we wouldn't really know that if it weren't for the birds. So one thing that's great about the big blue bands of the Montana Osprey Project is that they are nice and easy to sight. So we have had quite a few sightings of our chicks from Dunrovin. This first one was a chick from 2013, Dilly, was returned to the Hellgate nest in 2015. And then I believe you said he or she had been hit by a car and found deceased in 2016.
That's correct, Cherie. He was hit by a car between Lolo and Missoula.
Wow, that's pretty incredible that we can learn stuff like that with these bands. We also have Honor here. I included a photo of them as a little one. It's a nice photo. You can see that blue band spotted in 2016 off the coast of Texas. So on his way, on her way, on their way to some warmer grounds for winter. We have Honk from 2017. This is a photo from Louisiana. Um, same kind of deal on their way to warmer weather for the winter. But it's great to know that they're not only leaving our nest but making it pretty far. They fly long distances, and it's neat to learn about that. Here's Pip. This one's interesting, from 2019, seen in 2020 in El Salvador. And you can see that 5K band, bright and clear, beautiful bird. And then returned this year, just this past week, by the Hellgate nest, photographed by, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Louis Mateau. I know that he captures a lot of the sighting photos. He takes really, really nice photos of these ospreys. Wakati, I think that's how you say it. Zero J from 2018 returned to the Dunrovin nest on June 6th of last year. And then Congo, his sibling, returned in the day after. And obviously Harriet chased them both off. But it's cool that they returned, one after each other. And then Congo was seen again this year in June at Hellgate. He landed on the nest with Iris a couple of times, which was interesting to watch unfold a little bit. And then we have Hip from 2019, photograph taken again this month in Corvallis. So you can really see that the banding is helpful in a lot of different ways, and the success rate is very high with this stress level. They can withstand it, they can bounce back and be very healthy adults who go on to live happy osprey lives. I think that's all I've got. Yep.
All right, Cherie, that was terrific. I have some things I want to share now. If I can share my screen, hang on for a moment. I've got a couple of videos from previous years and then one from this year. The one from previous years is actually the very first time that our birds were banded. This goes clear back to 2013. And I think some of the people in our audience will be recognizing some of the people in the video. This was Harriet's first time to be included in a banding operation. And as you will see here momentarily, she doesn't like it. This was our very first experience at Dunrovin. Our web camera went in, was installed in 2011. And in 2011, Harriet and her then spouse, Ozzy, had two chicks, both of which fledged. And then the following year in 2012, they laid two eggs, but those eggs never hatched. And then the next year in 2013, we ended up with three chicks. And all of the community members and I named them Perseverance or Percy, Hope, and Dilly for diligence. And we were trying to honor the parents who had spent the whole previous summer trying to get those two eggs to hatch. It was a sad summer in 2012, but a happy one in 2013. So here is Harriet's first experience with banding, and you'll see that it's very stressful for her that first time, but over the years, she has gotten very accustomed to it and is no longer stressed by it. So first of all, the people who are in charge were from the University of Montana, as Cherie has pointed out, and they learn all kinds of really important things from banding studies, not just of osprey, but of other birds. You know, what causes their mortality, where they migrate, all of that kind of thing. But as Cherie indicated, the Project Osprey was focused primarily on heavy metal in the rivers. And as she pointed out, the heavy metals collect in the fish, and the fish collect.
Does it have audio too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, Harriet's coming in there, sticking all the way to the end. I hear a different kind of a chirp than we normally hear. A real short chirp, a very stressful chirp. She's very upset. You see, she waited till the last minute to do it. And you're watching Tycho right now, and he's very gentle with the birds. He puts them in a container that has ice in it, dry ice, and keeps it nice and cool. That's one of the biggest fears in banding these osprey chips is they're overheating. So often they use spray and spray them with water and put them in the bucket that cover these ice cool. And both Harriet and Ozzy were just frantic.
Not going far. Whoa. Oh man, they're both here.
And you can see it takes some heavy equipment to get up to the nest. Also notice when you're looking at the nest that you don't have to before we put it up. So now he's taking the container with the little chicks for our barn. And the gal with the helmet on has a GoPro. So some of these photos come from her. Put a little sleeve over the chick to keep it from struggling. And as you can see, here are the results. They weighed anywhere from 11 to 900 grams, 1100 to 900 grams. Okay, so there are two kinds of bands that are put on the ospreys. One are metal bands, and they're from the USGS, and they are bands that are internationally regulated by species. And if a bird is killed or a dead bird is found, you can turn that band in, and people will know where it was banded. And all birds have that same number system. But ospreys have a second band, which is large enough for people to see and to photograph. And in this case, it's a big blue band with two, either a letter or a number. And in this case, it was 77, 78, and 79. And as Cherie pointed out, 79 showed up several times. So that's how we recognized that Dilly had come back. So the silver band goes on one leg and the big blue band goes on another. Everybody tries to keep it very quiet for them. Keeping it cool and quiet reduces the stress.
No. That was just taking blood.
Okay, that's
so
right.
Heiko was just taking blood, and and he took feather samples.
Yeah, that's right.
And
okay.
so that's just to look for
your mercury and
the big 5 heavy metals, which are cadmium, zinc, arsenic, lead, and copper.
That's right. Okay.
And selenium.
And you can look in the feathers as well as the blood? All right, so while blood samples are being taken and the chicks are being banded, they're up there changing the cover on the camera.
Swallow good. Just gonna band.
Banding this one?
No, wait. There we go.
Do the princess wave? Are you scared of heights?
Watch your hands there. Yep, good. Watch your hands, your head, just the camera.
Yeah, and then the other one's over there somewhere.
Wow, covering all the angles.
So if I know for sure, I'll try and let you know.
Great.
So that's perfect. Yeah, and if I don't
Go
see it,
home.
maybe
Go
I'll
home.
see.
We don't have like
No.
actually, but if you send me a link,
Oh,
yeah.
That's interesting that they're some of the firstborn in the area.
Yeah.
They're the oldest chicks out of like
Oh,
200.
here we go. I think this might be it.
yelling at the truck on the floor.
Yay! Money.
Okay, so in this next video, which is in double time from this year, you're going to see a lot of changes from what happened a year in 2013. Okay, I'm going to close this for just. This is fast time, and in 2013, what we did was we had the TV cameras out there. A lot of different people were out there, and it was, you know, a regular major production because it was so new. Well, now fast forward to 2021, and it's kind of old hat for Harriet and old hat for the scientists. So this year we had one scientist come out. This was Rob from the Raptor View Research, and he went up there by himself. He has a little net, a hoop that it looks like a fishing net that he uses to catch these birds. And there are a number of things that you're going to notice. First of all, you see the perch. We added the perch. I think in about 2014, the perch went up. And then you'll notice that how much larger our chicks are than the chicks were then. In fact, it was a little bit marginal. And that's one of the reasons Rod came out when he did on that Friday afternoon, even though he lacked a full crew. He wanted to get these chicks banded because they were at the verge of flying. And once the birds fly, the stress of taking them out of the nest, it just goes way, way up. So he wanted to come out and get the birds before they flew. They were on the verge of doing that. He had no crew, so our own James Wassam got pressed into working with him. But I'll just play this short video. Again, this is in fast time, double the time, but you can see how he goes about capturing these ospreys. Okay, so our birds this year weighed 1,550. Now remember in 2013, the heaviest bird was about 1,100 pounds, and this was a 1,500 gram bird. You can see major difference in development. You saw the wings flapping. You can definitely tell that this was more problematic for the birds than at that younger age. Anyway, our three birds were very, very close in size. Pfizer, which was the first one to be hatched, weighed in at 1,550. Maud, the second one to be hatched, was 1,480. And JJ was just a few grams smaller than Maud. One of the nice things, of course, about their having those bands now is we can easily tell them at the nest while we're watching. Whoops. I think I started over and I did not mean to do that. Let me fast forward to get to the same place. Operator error here. Okay, so 4 minutes. Okay, the bird that you saw flying around was not Harriet, it was Swoop. And what was interesting is Harriet is so used to this operation that she recognizes when the truck drives down the road and she just flies off the nest. She's very comfortable. I wouldn't say totally comfortable, but she's not alarmed, overly alarmed by people coming and doing this to her chicks because it's always been so successful. But of course, this was Swoop's first year, and he was just flying around, chirping, 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 and very stressed by the whole action because this had never happened to him before. So it's a completely different thing for Harriet, who's been around the corner a few times. So as I said, our James Wassam got involved with handling the chicks this year. You can tell what a hard task this was and how much he hated it with that big smile. He very wisely wore gloves. And let me tell you, these chicks were feisty and were big enough that they were going at it. They were grabbing James by the glove and grabbing Rob by the skin. These guys were ready to roll. So there's James holding one of the chicks while Rob takes some samples and puts bands on. And then they use a little syringe to take a little vial of blood. And of course, the blood is necessary to analyze for the heavy metals. And with it, we can also get a sample of DNA, and we'll be able to determine the gender of these chicks, which is something we will do. Now, here is not just a band on an osprey, but a radio pack. This is called a radio backpack. And this is a photo from a Wyoming osprey migration study. And when you put a GPS transmitter on the back of a bird of prey, you really get to learn some other information that is extremely interesting. And just below us, the people from Raptor View Research did this on an osprey chick in 2018. The name of the chick is Boots. And you can see from these lines where Boots has been. So let's just take a close look here at it. In 2018, she followed this orange line. First, she came down south, and then she went up north, and then she went all the way down to Florida and crossed over to Cuba, where she spent the winter. And then she stayed there until 2020. And from these radio colors, they are learning that this is very common, that the ospreys don't come back to the area where they were hatched for several years until they are mature enough to breed. And then they come back looking for a mate. So the following year, this green line, she came back to her home area in western Montana. And where she was tagged is just about 15 miles south of Dunrobin at a place called the MPG Ranch. So that was her spring migration in 2020. And this was her summer range. The big blot of yellow was where she was all last summer, right in the Rocky Mountain area here. And then her fall migration in 2020, she went cross country. Again, this is what is so interesting with all of this information is they're really seeing that there is no particularly set pattern for all of this. So the spring migration is this green line here, and down again, back to the coast of Florida and back to Cuba. And you can see this time, instead of going to Florida, she jumped off on the top end of Florida as opposed to the bottom end. And then she came back in the fall of, or in the spring of 2020, which was, I got this mixed up a little bit. Here's her fall migration is this blue band. So last fall, she came down this way and flew straight across the Gulf of Mexico and down to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And then she spent the winter of 2021 down on the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. And then it looks like she had a false start to her migration back this spring, went out over the Gulf of Mexico, thought better of it, and came back and followed the land all the way up the Rocky Mountains of North America back to her home territory. You know, they're learning an awful lot about how birds react to big weather events like hurricanes and pressure changes and things of that nature these birds are able to determine things that we are not. They're able to feel things that we cannot. So her migration across the Gulf of Mexico may have been interrupted by a storm that she felt, no, this is not going to be a safe place to passage because a big storm is coming. So I think that's all that I have in the way of slides. So I will stop there, and I'm happy, both Cherie and I are still on, and we'd be happy to take any comments or questions that any of you had. So just chat in the chat box. We're going to give you a few minutes. And James, while we're doing that, maybe you would switch to the Osprey nest camera so we can talk about our beloved Osprey while we answer questions. As many of you already know, the Osprey chicks have all fledged. That means they've taken flight but under their own wing. And the first week or so of their learning how to fly, they really just scoot all over the place. They're here, there, they're everywhere. But they generally eat back at the nest. And in fact, you can see some serious food fights going on here. These three chicks have been wonderfully polite to each other up until this point. And now they're sort of learning their independence and they're standing up for themselves independently since Harriet's no longer involved in their life in feeding them. So right now what's happening is both Harriet and Swoop are bringing fish to the nest. They meet at the nest, and this is still where the Osprey chicks eat their fish. And it's primarily because they need the platform of the nest to be able to open up and kill the fish themselves. They're not good enough yet at flying and managing their talons and all of that to eat a fish off of a perch. These are all part of the learning process that the ospreys go through. Additionally, you're going to find that they don't fish until they migrate, which is a really interesting thing. You would think that they would learn from mom and dad, and certainly they go and watch. You'll see them down at the river watching, but you won't see them fishing. It's, that migration is a huge leap of faith. Jump off, nobody's showing you the way. Somehow they know which way to go, and that's when they learn how to get their own fish. So Celia has a question about mercury in the bitterroot, and that's a really good question, Celia. Yes, they were surprised to find mercury in the bitterroot. And the bitterroot, our nest, was used as a control nest because it's not on the Clark Fork. And they know that there was heavy metal mining upriver on the Clark Fork, but there isn't in the bitterroot. And this is one of the things that got them to thinking about other drainages and streams in western Montana. And maybe I'll ask Cherie to chime in on that because you were with them last year. Weren't they finding it in other drainages as well?
Yeah, so it is found in not as high levels, but still a surprising find. And I don't know which other streams that it's in, but that whole big Superfund site and a lot of the rivers around here have been affected by some kind of pollution to put that in the sediments in the stream, and then obviously it sends it up to the top to the ospreys. That's interesting that Dunrovin was in a control nest and then wasn't really able to be a control nest after finding that it wasn't a good control.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that they did find it. They were very surprised when they did because there's no really large scale mining upriver of Dunrovin's nest on the Bitterroot, whereas in the Clark Fork there was a lot of industrial mining way up in the headwaters of the Clark Fork. So it was a surprising find. But the
Even for the
reason
Clark
they
Fork.
also, excuse me, go ahead.
It was surprising even for the Clark Fork. They were expecting to find, the other arsenic, cadmium, the ones that we know are deposited by acid mine drainage. So mercury was a surprising one for both rivers, I believe.
Yeah, and the reason they take the chicks as opposed to the adults is in the chicks that are born here that first summer, they only eat fish from the local river, the local watershed. So the adults, their blood contains fish from where their winter grounds are. So it's contaminated that they have, blood and from a diet that is much more widely distributed, whereas the chicks eat only fish from the local river. And that's why the chick's blood is so important.
It's also tough to catch a full grown osprey. A little easier when they can't fly yet.
You know, Celia has asked, how do we get rid of it in the river? And I don't think anybody has a good answer to that. Some of it is naturally occurring just from the stream beds themselves, from the minerals that are out of bedrock. And of course, if you know of the source of pollution, like a mining or whatever, like, the Butte area was a huge mining industrial area, they can control some of that pollution because they know the absolute source. But when it's a more diffuse source and it's coming from a variety of areas, then it's really difficult to control. Good question. Oh, and Celia has another question. Do the males fish local ponds in Lolo Creek? Absolutely. In fact, as we all know, they fish a koi pond, which one of our neighbors keeps in Lolo. And the first time Swoop brought back 2 big goldfish, I thought, oh dear, someone's going to be unhappy because Swoop has found their goldfish. But not so. The woman who runs that koi pond was delighted, and she said, oh no, we'll just go buy more koi fish. It was great. But yes, there's a little bit of a lake here called Lolo Lake, which is really was a former oxbow of the river, and now it's more stagnant. But we've seen the osprey fish there, and there are some other ponds and areas around that they fish. But generally, it's within a few miles of the nest. And that's why the ospreys distribute themselves across the landscape. They don't like to compete. However, there are areas, including here in Western Montana, where you would be surprised there are several ospreys nests right next to each other. Down in the Lee Metcalf, for example, there are several ospreys nests just, within sight of each other. So they're territorial, but if the food supply is abundant, then they're less territorial. And the food supply at the Lee Metcalf is easier because it's marshes and ponds as opposed to the river. As everybody who has watched our nest knows, when the river floods, getting fish out of the river can be very, very difficult for the male osprey. And this particular year, we have just a fishing pool. This guy can fish in almost any water and find the biggest fish around. He's just been wonderful, and he's really supplied this family with just an abundance of fish. So these chicks
at night too.
Pardon?
It's incredible that he can fish at night.
Yes, we have found him bringing in fish before dawn and after dark. He's
what a guy.
Man. I think he needs his own Marvel movie, the superhero.
I'd watch it.
I would too. And for those of you who are new to ospreys, generally it's the male that will stay until the last chick flies away. The male will stay and stay and stay and feed that last chick. And we're all kind of joking that Maud's going to be, wait until the very end, living in his parents' basement for a long time before hitting the road. So, Swoop and Maud could be here till October, who knows? But we did have one that fledged very late, in late September, and this was when Ozzy was here, and he stayed and stayed and stayed and stayed and kept that chick supplied, and then once the chick left, so did he. Well, Cherie, I really want to thank you for all that you are doing for this, and I really appreciate your background and your work on putting this all together. If we don't have any more questions, I think we'll say goodbye to everybody, but keep watching. This is going to go on now for at least another month. These osprey will be in their area, and like I said, probably till you know, the first 2 weeks of September, we'll have these chicks still wanting their parents to feed them. So thank you all. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Do join us tomorrow. I think we have some fun things on our schedule for tomorrow as well. Feeding the horses, etc. And then next Monday, we have another full schedule of more events. We're going to meet our herd. We even have an art project for you all lined up next week. So get out your colored pencils. We got work for you to do. All right. Thank you all very much for joining us. We love having you here. See you back at the ranch. Bye.
Thank you.